Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Einstein's Eyes. Today, we are diving into a crucial topic in medical data privacy, de-identifying protected health information, or PHI, to protect patient privacy. With the rise of AI in medicine, data privacy and ethical management of sensitive information have really become paramount concerns. Excuse me. I'm excited to have Julia Komissarchik, CEO and co-founder of Glenor, which is an AI identification, a de-identification company, which is on the cutting edge of this field. Before we go, I'd like to say I'm Carl Rosen. Welcome. I am an oculoplastic surgeon and neuroophthalmologist at Ophthalmic Associates in Anchorage, Alaska. Been here for 30 years. With my co-host and friend, John Ditkoff. John?
Hi, all. I'm John Ditkoff. I've been in practice for 30 years in northern New Jersey after doing training in New York City with Carl and Albert Einstein, hence Einstein's Eyes. And I do general ophthalmology, specializing in cornea, but I'm really interested in this awesome topic.
Yeah. So thank you, John. So Julia, it's a pleasure to have you here. You bring a wealth of experience. You did your undergrad at Berkeley in mathematics, I believe, and then Cornell for computer science. You did a graduate degree. Over 2 decades in AI, deep learning, natural language processing. You've even worked on enhancing Wikipedia's multilingual functionality, as I read, which is really impressive. Today, though, we're going to focus on your latest project, which actually is not so new. You've been around for a long time, but Glenor's PHI, or Protected Health Information Sanitizing Platform. So take it away, Julia.
Well, Carl, John, thank you for having me on this podcast. And it's a pleasure to participate. So yes, as Carl, as you mentioned, my background is AI. I have 10 US patents in that area. And I am a co-founder and CEO of a company called Glenor. And for Glenor, our goal is to empower data sharing while protecting patients' privacy. And actually, that's what I wanted to delve in this presentation, is why would we need to share data? There is no question why we should protect patients' privacy, but why would we even want to discuss sharing data? And as far as the Glenor is concerned, we basically developed software which runs, it's full automatic, and it runs at source. So only the data custodians, it runs behind their firewall. It could be in the basement, it could be in the cloud. But the important thing is that the data before and after the process is accessed only by the data custodian, which creates additional level of security. So it's full automatic, runs at source, and takes about 5 minutes to install. So our goal is to not necessarily to replace the existing data workflows, but enhance them to ensure even further that the patient's privacy is protected and no PHI, protected health information, is missed by the existing workflows. So, and our customers include, we work with NIH, we work with different government entities, we work with the large hospitals, we work with big pharma, lab networks, etc. So anywhere where the data needs to be shared with a third party, we work as a data filter. So that's about Glenor. Now, in terms of what I wanted to talk to you about is something which goes beyond just Glenor, or actually goes into the why we're doing what we're doing with Glenor. And that is the healthcare at large, AI and healthcare role in healthcare, and what can we as individual participants can do in our opinion, and also looking for fellow travelers who would be interested in working with us on those initiatives. So before we dive into this, I wanted to sort of create a bigger picture. So if we look at our healthcare system, and it's US, but also elsewhere, there is growing disbalance between the number of available doctors versus the number of patients that need their services. And that disbalance is not going to be smaller. It grows larger and larger. For example, for radiologists, the number of images and machines that are available allowed to take those images is growing by leaps and bounds. At the same time, the number of radiologists' growth is at most same as before, if not dropping the number of radiologists. And we've done a lot of research in that area. We actually looked into the availability of radiologists. So, for example, in 2023, there were about 21,000 practicing radiologists in the US out of the 50,000 registered ones. And many radiologists quit the profession due to early retirement or by going into the areas of management, etc. And that's just one of the reasons is burnout. It's getting more and more, it's too much pressure. For example, NHS England, between 2020 and 2022, the median age at which a clinical radiologist retired dropped from 58 to 51. And by the way, if anybody's interested, send me a message. I'll send you the exact quotes. There wasn't a place to sort of create those quotes, but we do have them. So, and we actually looked at it from, I'm a mathematician, so is my co-founder. So we looked at it from let's calculate from bottom up how much radiologists are needed versus how many radiologists we have. And that's actually one of the papers that we are about to publish, and that's goes into the number of RVUs, relative value units, for measuring amount of radiologists that will be needed to process things versus the amount of radiologists that are available for us. In the States, as I said, it's actually an international problem, but our focus is United States, especially for this conversation, right? So is it all doom and gloom? Not quite. And one of the things which is quite promising is the idea of looking into AI to not to replace radiologists. And that's sort of everybody's saying, oh, yes, AI is here to replace radiologists. Not at all. Every time I have this discussion, I'm the one discussing, don't worry, guys. Humans are still much better in so many different things, especially the most important ones. But how can we use AI to automate certain things so that radiologists have more time to deal with more difficult cases, right? For example, mammography, right? Everybody has yearly mammography, but most of the time those are benign, meaning there is no cancer detected, and it would be nice to remove some of those obvious cases so that radiologists don't have to spend time on those, if those cases are obvious, right? We need humans for borderline cases, obvious cases where there's a lot of human attention that will be needed. But so AI might help with certain things. And one of the things which is quite promising is so-called self-supervised machine learning. We know it as LLMs or ChatGPT. That's where the models are trained on the humongous amount of data. And what I'm talking about is humongous, right? So for example, we're talking about ChatGPT, they trained it on internet data, and actually recently they discovered it's not enough. They need more. Right? So if one has a lot of data, it's possible to use those models that are quite promising and have a lot of use and traction right now. However, imagine this is public data, internet data. We're talking about billions of data points, right? But for healthcare, the situation is much more difficult because we're not just talking about bits and bytes. We're talking about somebody's very private, very personal medical records. So before those records can be accessible by models for training, they have to be de-identified. Because without it, we're actually violating patients' privacy, and there are laws against it, so it's illegal. It's also morally wrong, and also it impacts the reputation damage of the hospitals that might be considering sharing this data. But it doesn't mean they shouldn't share it at all. What we're talking about is the identification portion. So once we de-identify the data, then it can be used, and then those AI models can actually have access to the data, and that way they can create generalizable and less biased models. Because the opposite is if, let's say, a startup has a connection with even large hospital, they will be training the data on that large hospital's data set, but that might not be representative of everybody. So, for example, in 2020, JAMA had an interesting article where most of the data that is used for training models comes from, a couple of states, California and New York, depends on how you look at it, but basically, and what about the rest of us? There's quite a few others, especially when it comes to rural health, right? Tribal health, everything which has to do with not large cities and a couple of handful of hospitals. Once again, I'm using US examples, but that's true for elsewhere as well. So when it comes to de-identification, that explains why we are doing what we're doing, right? Because our focus is how do we make it easier for patients themselves and data custodians, aka hospitals, labs, anybody else, to de-identify the data easily and safely, and make sure that before the data leaves the stable, it's de-identified. Because there's actually an interesting thing. So black market, reportedly, if somebody wants to buy a credit card report, it will cost $1. If somebody wants to buy a medical record, it will be $300. There was a reason for it, because for the in credit card report, things go up, things go down, things change. In healthcare, if somebody had a childhood disease, they will have it no matter what happens in their for the rest of their lives. And a lot of this information can also be very dangerous for blackmailing, for discrimination, for all the possible things that we can think of. So there is a reason why there's such a dramatic change. That's why what we are focusing on is how to make sure that this data doesn't get leaked. Because we've all heard all those stories, right? Change Healthcare, others, data always gets exposed. But if one is de-identified the data, then it stops being such an attractive thing for the bad guys, because it's anonymous, right? It can be used for AI models. It's also much more secure because there isn't nothing much you can use with it. You can do with it. So what we're talking about, and that's something that is sort of very dear to my heart, is how do we, as a society, build huge, and I don't mean huge, medical data lakes, right? And they also have to be multimodal. What I mean by multimodal is, if let's say we're talking about OCT files, E2E files for eye doctors, but we're also talking about X-rays, MRIs, but we're also talking about reports. We're talking about videos, like OR, operating room videos, photographs, for example, for dermatology, right? Voice recordings that are extremely important in mental health and other things. All of these data points are extremely useful, different modalities, and also extremely sensitive. So when we're talking about large data lakes, that's what we're describing, those huge multimodal data lakes that can be de-identified, for sure. De-identified, that's the first word, right? But once those lakes are available, then companies who are developing AI models, as well as individuals, anybody can have access to this and then be able to train their models on it. So those models can actually be used in real life. They won't be trained just on a sliver of data. So it could be open source, it could be commercial. That's all the doors are opened. In the sense that one can think of it as a democratization of data.
So it's the same idea, to protect. I know you're talking mainly about, in a different sense, but like my own personal medical records when I go to a doctor or when I see a patient. How are they protected? Is it the same way, or is it just for AI?
So that's actually an interesting thing, because your doctor actually needs to know who you are, right? Because that's where identification is very important, and linkage is very important.
De-identify them, yeah.
Yeah. So de-identification is needed for anybody who is outside of the doctor-patient relationship.
But for example, the insurance company might ask to see the records on a patient. Yes. There would be a way to identify them by a number, but I guess you really still, like you just said, they really have to see their records, and the patients give permission for that, of course.
Yes.
I guess that would not be. You would not need it for that.
No. Right. For that, there's a different challenge, which is how to make sure so patients go to different locations, different hospitals. They might be moving from state to state. How to connect this information? That's a different issue, but you're always talking about one record. Yeah. John Smith, who lived in California, moved to Alaska, then moved to Utah, and you have to connect this information. Yes, and there are actually initiatives for that.
Well, I think the goal has always been to have one universal electronic records, but we're very far away from that, in my opinion.
Yes. But here it's slightly different. This universal record that belongs to you. You have access to it. Your treating physician has access to it. The secretary of treating physician shouldn't. Yeah. Even the nurse shouldn't. There are different levels of access. So for that, the question is more of security. How do we make sure that nobody can break into this? What I'm talking about is various data lakes in different states, different locations, where because everything is de-identified, you can actually safely share it with third party, which will be, for example, AI in healthcare, model training, or research for that matter.
Right.
So it's two different issues, and both need to be resolved. What I'm talking about is the second one, not the individual patient work and how to connect them, but how do I make sure that this data can be available without actually tracing back to the patient? Because then patient's privacy will be violated. Because then, I will know your particular illnesses, and I shouldn't, because I'm not a treating physician. I'm just an outsider.
More data points so that the model improves in accuracy, it doesn't hallucinate as much. And it just provides more precise information
Yeah,
for
protect.
the end user.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah. So
and you're absolutely right. And also it has to be diverse. The model trained on a city folk will not work in rural situation. Different subset of issues, everything is different, right? So it has to be diverse across quite a few different parameters, and then the systems can be robust enough to be applicable to all of our population.
right,
Yeah.
of course. It's like in any training program. If John and I only did one cataract surgery, we wouldn't be very good. But the fact that we did, 5,000, we're better, and we understand the nuances, we understand the pitfalls, we know what to look for.
Volume.
That's the same thing with the more data, the more experience, and the wiser you are.
Mhm.
And the more you just get less flustered when you're approached with a problem.
Exactly. And also, it's different age, different development, etc. Eric Topol actually had a very interesting research done, which is out of 120 FDA approved systems in 2023, he researched those, and they're not used because they're not generalizable. So we have even FDA approved systems, right? Even they cannot be used just willy-nilly. They're not diverse, and they were not trained on diverse enough data. And also, it's not only a question of how do we make sure that the training data is diverse, but we also have to make sure that the testing data is diverse. So let's say I build a model based on the Utah population. I need to test it on Alaska population, because even though we both have very diverse data sets, but there will be some certain validated on your data before we can actually sort of let it loose on the public, right?
Right. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like post-marketing analysis for a drug. A lot of times, the clinical trials say one thing, but after it's out on the market for 5 years, you get very different
What's a bigger
perspectives
population?
on it. Yeah, you see really the pitfalls and the adverse effects that can happen.
Yeah.
Julia, listen, thank you so much. It sounds like Glenor is really paving the way for a safer, more secure medical data sharing, and which is essential for advancing, AI-driven medical research. But really, thanks for joining us today. I think our audience got a closer look at how innovative technology like Glenor's is helping sanitize or de-identify patient health information and addressing some of the biggest challenges in data privacy today. So we salute you. We're impressed, and keep going, because this is really important and allows all of us to get better and to use better information in our practices, whether it's hospital-based or community-based. So we're looking to transform healthcare. Yeah.
There's actually sort of an addition to that, right? Because we just discussed the concept of it, but there's also a business model behind it. And the thing is that it's possible this data should not be just given away, right? It's actually, in my belief, is that both patients and data custodians like hospitals and labs should be actually able to be compensated for providing this data. Because as we know, a lot of hospitals are in the red. So this is for the hospitals an opportunity to leverage what they have without impeding their patients, right? Because once again, we're only talking about de-identified data. No patient's privacy is violated, but that can allow for certain hospitals to change their financial situation and be able to help other patients because they will be able to monetize this data. Because when we're talking about the players in this ecosphere, we have patients, we have data custodians like hospitals, labs, etc. We also have, the data lakes, and they could be, Alaska-wide data lake, or just data lake of X-rays. It could be so many different things, right? It could be geographically or illness-dependent lakes, and all of these can be owned. It could be state-owned, company-owned. There's so many different ways to do this. But the important thing is then you have data users, which are in this case AI and healthcare companies. So they can be the ones, the data lakes can actually provide not only the data, but the computing power so that the data users can leverage those data lakes and at the same time compensate the data custodians and the patients for using that data. So there's actually a quite harmonious idea behind it. It's not just an idea, it's something which can be fiscally responsible as well.
That's
It
great.
makes sense.
So it's a win-win. So it's a good business model.
Exactly. So for me, one thing which I'm always looking for is, anybody who is interested, please reach out to me and let's talk about this. There's so many things we can do. And
Julie, where can they reach you?
So my email is julia@glenor.com. You can find me also on LinkedIn. And please DM me or email me, and let's talk about this.
It sounds great. So thank you. I think our audience really benefited from that. Please contact Julia, and you can discuss Glenor and what her company has to offer. Perhaps you can monetize the data that you have and have a win-win situation. So, Julia, once again, thank you.
Thank you very
Please
much.
like and subscribe if you found this useful. John, always good seeing you, my friend.
Great to see you guys.
All right, we'll talk to you later.
Good to
Bye.
learn some new information.